So some basic background on Mayo Clinic Rochester is you're all listening to me and you're trying to think, in your heads how this is going. That's how I think. Is I'm listening to somebody talk and it's like, okay, what scale is this and how many people is this affecting and things. So I kind of like to set that stage before I start getting into the how and the why and the what. And so again, these numbers are pre-COVID. COVID has affected all our lives in so many different ways, and it has affected campus traffic and things somewhat. Our hospitals are still nearly at capacity. Patient visits are still really high. We had a little lull last year, but activity is still bustling. So I don't have current numbers. Prior to that, we had approximately 36,000 employees on site at our Rochester facilities on a daily basis, Monday through Friday. Every year to year, we would have over 1 million individual patient visits per year at the Rochester facilities. That data doesn't take into account contractors working on our sites, support staff, and visitors that come with the patients. So the estimated number of people daily visiting our campus is almost 70,000 people every day. And that's 300. Winter, summer, it really doesn't seem to matter. People weren't coming there as tourists; they were coming there, for a need, and weather didn't really play a factor into that. So winter, the numbers were consistent. Basic background on area, and I'll try to whip through this here pretty quick so we can get into the actual details here pretty soon. But Mayo Clinic crews, we took care of about 15 miles of sidewalk, about 120 acres of parking lot and roadway. These parking lots were nearly at capacity. Almost all the parking lots were full. So there was no opportunity to wait. There was no piling, no snow piles could take up parking spaces, things like that. Parking was a premium at Mayo Clinic. So this was a big effort. We have 8 parking ramps in our downtown campus. Those of us that have experienced any kind of maintenance with parking ramps, but especially snow removal, understands the unique challenges posed by parking ramp snow removal. We have approximately 300 doorways throughout the campus that our crews maintain. We have about 800 outdoor steps. And Mayo Clinic in Rochester has about 350 acres of green space. I bring up the green space because that's what we are trying to protect as we do our snow removal activities, and trying to minimize the impact on those. All of this on this screen is spread over about 10 square miles in Rochester and over about 25 different sites throughout Rochester. So as you can see, it's pretty diverse. I counted our downtown campus as one site too, to give you some kind of idea. That's about 40 city blocks square is about what makes up our main downtown campus. So that's a quick overview of what was under our provisions and what I'll be discussing here in our talk today. So as we get into it, a picture like on the screen, this is a statue in Statuary Park of Dr. William and Dr. Charlie Mayo, two of our founders, the sons of our founder, and really largely responsible for putting Mayo Clinic in the position as a worldwide healthcare center that it is today. Beautiful flowers. I think those of you on the call probably look out your windows or on your walk into work. It probably looks something similar to this. But being beginning of September now, we know before we know it, they're gonna look like this. And it's hard to believe, but I think we've probably all been through it enough. We know this is coming before we know it. And I know I relate to this picture because I've had this exact same look on my face. I don't know how many times as I've been dealing with snow. I've probably looked like this a few times too, been out there dealing with it. So, and I think this is almost everywhere, but Mayo Clinic demands a very high level of service when it comes to snow removal. The patients have to get to their appointments. They have them scheduled. Some of these patients have had these appointments scheduled for months and months, 6 months. It's not their fault that it falls on the day we get a big snowfall. Snow removal gets the patients there. We also have to get the employees there to service our patients on time, with as least stress as possible. So when they're ready to see the patient, they're not worried that they got stuck in a parking lot on the way into work. They're able to get into work, get in there, and take care of our patients. We look at snow removal as a vital part of the process of treating our patients at Mayo Clinic. In my 19 years at Mayo Clinic, we've always met that expectation. We've got people in and we've got people out, with minimal impact on that. But at the end of the season, I didn't always feel good about it because, at what cost did we do that? We got people in and out, but I look at all the damage to our landscapes every spring after the snow would melt. I look at the damage to our infrastructure that was caused by snow removal, and infrastructure was specifically salt. And then the environmental damage that we were doing as well, with our efforts on snow removal. And when I became supervisor, that was compounded by the budgetary side of it. When I became responsible for the budget for snow removal and then the overall landscape budget, I started seeing the numbers, and it was tremendous the amount we were spending on salt. It was unsustainable, to say the least. So it became an effort that became one of my main first focuses on improvement when I became grounds maintenance supervisor, was salt reduction. And for those previously listed reasons, there's multiple reasons. It wasn't one, it was all of those reasons, but the thing that made this difficult is I was afraid of compromising safety if it wasn't done correctly. This was back in 2015. Back in 2015, there wasn't the resources available that there is today, on salt reduction and things like that. It was just kind of emerging as it had been out for a while that it was important, but kind of the how and the why, it wasn't readily available. So, it was something that, I started to do incrementally. I'll go through some steps on kind of that how I got even into it before I get into what I actually did and things like that, because the how and the process leading up to it is equally as important to the what. This took the most time and the most effort. The what is probably more interesting, but the how, if this is something you're looking to implement in your facilities, this is something, hopefully you can take something away from. So like I said, I didn't just jump right into it. My first winter as grounds maintenance supervisor, I took over supervisor in August of that year. So, I was already a little bit behind snow removal planning and things like that. And so I recognized the need almost immediately, looking at budgets, like, wow, this has to change. What can we do? And I was a member of the crew. I was one of the people the winter before responsible for putting down too much salt. I was there. Well, now I'm the one up in the chair responsible for getting people to put down less. So it was a big jump in 1 year, and it was too soon to make big changes. So I took winter number one as more of an observation winter, is really paying attention to where the salt was going, having a lot of conversations and being out, around the salt, the snow removal process. Where was it going during the process? Where was it going down after the snow was moved? Looking at billing, really paying close attention to that. And our parking lots are mainly done by contractors. We have 4 different contractors that do the plowing on our hard parking lot surfaces. So 4 different sets of bills, 4 different practices. It was a lot to really understand and get my arms around. And that was winter number one, was that. The other thing is I've been part of other change efforts in the past, and reducing salt and changing the way we did snow removal was a large scale change effort. And from my experience, and I also did some research and reading on this as well at the same time, and those are often better done incrementally, rather than just a quick change. If I wanted to make this a permanent change, I didn't want to make a change for one winter. I wanted this to be a permanent change for Mayo Clinic. So if I wasn't there, this practice would continue on. It wasn't dependent on me, and it wasn't dependent on my crew to continue this effort. It just became part of the Mayo Clinic culture. So, I learned that first winter wasn't easy to see all this salt put down, but it was a necessary step in the process to really gather that data and start those soft conversations with the why are we putting the salt down? Do you think we could have put less down? Do you think we could have put none down? Things like that, and just pages of notes and observations and things. Going into winter number 2, I got more aggressive with it. I was able to start earlier. I was able to start at our post-winter meetings with each contractor and the post-winter meeting with my Mayo Clinic employees. It was noted as a goal for the following winter. We're going to reduce our salt use, and that was met with skepticism by I'd say a significant number of the people, a majority of the people. That was met with skepticism, and I heard things like, "Well, it depends on the winter. People are going to slip and fall. You can't," things like that. A lot of that, and again, you take the feedback. I took the feedback, and I was happy to hear it. And I think the comfort of communication was really important in this. I was okay to hear the dissenting opinion always. I didn't try to discourage people from sharing their opinions and their thoughts on this. It was really, it was a group effort. I'm here representing this for Mayo Clinic, but it was such a group effort, and everybody's opinion was so valuable in getting there. That these discussions, and this winter too, I think we probably made about as much, other than step 3, winter number 2, summer discussions made a big jump in our winter 2 salt savings. Was just, let's just be careful with our salt. Put it down when we need to. Let's spot salt more. Let's is there some other way we can do this without salting? Let's really look at our properties, and where do we need to put down salt, and where do we probably not, and things. I had a big issue with white parking lots all the time. If it was snowing, they were white with snow. If it wasn't snowing, they were white with salt. It was just kind of common, and it was sort of a joke within Rochester about the white Mayo Clinic parking lots. And and I didn't really take it too personally, probably until this winter, when I realized, what those white parking lots really represented. And that was something I wanted to get away from. I realized that was excess salt being applied to our parking lots that we didn't need. And that again was wasted dollars. That was harmful to the environment. It was there was a lot of factors to those white parking lots that had just become kind of a joke within the community. So that still happened in winter number 2. But when that happened, I would have a discussion with the contractor. Hey, I think you might have put on a little bit too much salt, or why did you salt last night? It was 0 degrees on a Saturday, and it was light fluffy snow. Do you think you really needed to salt after you plowed everything? Or should we have let that sit, since our census is way down on the weekends? Maybe we let that sit and see if we need to salt Sunday or Monday morning before people get here. It was conversations like that were starting, and then that would voluntarily start to happen at times. So I did recognize some salt savings on that winter just because of this. But with 4 contractors plus I had a dozen Mayo Clinic employees, it was all over the board. I had people that wouldn't put down a granular salt even when it was needed, and I had others who just continued on putting salt down like they always had, and everywhere in between. And I really needed to get the teams focused together. And again, my job was grounds maintenance supervisor, not just salt reduction supervisor. So I had another full-time job besides doing this. It was I didn't have enough time to do this on my own. I didn't quite have enough people in-house who again had other duties to do, to carry this torch and do it. And so I started searching out for some help. And in that, kind of at the end of winter too, beginning of summer, I came across the Smart Salt training, and that's what you see on the screen here. I didn't really know anybody that had been through it. I found one person who had went through it. I didn't really get much feedback from that person. So I got a hold of Connie Fortin, had a discussion with her. What is the program? What's it about? And after having that discussion with her, I decided it was worthwhile. And I trained all my Mayo Clinic snow landscape grounds maintenance staff they went through the level 1 certification program. So everybody that applied salt, had anything to do with snow removal at Mayo Clinic, went through this program and received the level 1 certification. They passed the test. And I tell you what, this was the thing that I needed to focus everybody on the same goal was this certification course right here. All that effort that I put in winter number 2, I was running around from person to person, and the amount of emails and text messages and meetings and things I had. This training did more than all of that I did. It got everybody aware. And I'm not going to say it didn't erase the skepticism from everybody. There was still some healthy skepticism about some of the things we learned in this class, but it wasn't dismissed. This class touched everybody in some way. Everybody in this class puts down salt, and somehow the salt that they put down affected that person, either in their leisure time or their professional time or their interest somehow, and they were all willing to and happy to be part of this salt reduction effort at this point. This training was tremendous. It got us all focused. It got us all on the same page, and we were really moving forward with our salt reduction efforts after this course. So that's our background. That was kind of my 3 winter roll up to salt reduction. And you can see it was winter number 1 was a very small amount of salt reduction. Winter number 2 was a little bit more. And I'll go through these numbers a little more later in here. Winter number 3, huge, really big. And there was no coincidence that was post Smart Salt Level 1 training. I'm not here as Mayo Clinic endorsing this. I'm stating facts that I have data to back up on this. It was great. And again, it was that outside help was tremendous. And it didn't end at the class. If we had questions, if we had concerns, that support would continue into the future. So again, being in September, I hope most of us that are responsible for snow removal activities have been planning for a while. If not, I think the time to get started would be now for snow removal. Some of the most valuable time you'll spend is pre-winter planning, and if that's equipment purchasing, maintenance, getting your crews lined up, getting contracts lined up, fully understanding your customers' properties, seeing them now while they're fully in bloom, while they're busy with customers, kind of just really see what these customers' accounts are used for. And it's much nicer to meet with a customer outside when it's 75 degrees than it is when it's 30 degrees and you're standing outside freezing trying to have a conversation. It's not easy to set that time aside, but I think it is really valuable time and time spent. So I'm going to go through some things. Again, it seems like this is going to be really obvious. It's obvious stuff. Well, this is really, it shouldn't be a big deal. And again, it shouldn't. I didn't reinvent snow removal here. I'm just sharing some practices at Mayo Clinic. It saved us a lot of salts, and I hope you can take some of this away and utilize this on your sites. So as we look at this set of stairs in the picture, you'll notice at the top of the stairs there's a bus shelter. What's not pictured, this is about half the staircase. This is out in kind of a rural laboratory. I don't know, probably 1,500 employees, 2,000 employees work in this rather large laboratory, vital laboratory to Mayo Clinic Rochester, as well as hospitals all over the world for testing, medical testing. So at the bottom of these stairs is the bus pickup. So employees come out of the building, they stage in that bus shelter at the top. When the bus pulls up, they go down the stairs and enter the bus. You can see by the snow depth on each side, this blows across. It's a steep hillside. I wish I would have had a better picture from the other way to really see how treacherous these stairs are, but they're not easy stairs to maintain in the wintertime at all. This was our number one. So our Mayo Clinic facilities has a portal where employees can send maintenance requests. And in the wintertime, it was normally an ice or snow type of concern that employee would send. This was our number one concern for 4 or 5 years running that we tracked, was these set of stairs right here. The stairs are slippery was the most common language we found dozens and dozens of times every winter. Stairs are slippery, stairs are slippery. We would get that. My crews would respond. Sometimes they, in the past, and I've been guilty of this when I was on the crew, you would kind of take a quick look, you didn't see anything, you'd take some scoops of salt and you'd throw it down the steps. and you'd move on because you're busy. We have, this is a portion of the amount of outdoor steps we have at Mayo. So nothing about the doorways, the sidewalks, things like that. I don't have staff to have one person be assigned to these stairs. So you would just salt them and move on. And if there was 2 steps that were slippery, it was kind of assumed they were all slippery. You just throw it. Well, it didn't seem to stop the work requests. They kept coming, and we put salt barrels at the top and bottom of the stairs for employees to salt if they needed to. And that barrel would empty in a day. It would be 200 pounds of salt in that barrel, and it'd just be gone. We're filling that barrel all the time. Something had to be done. There has to be something better than just continuing to do this. And I had other areas. This is one example. I probably had a half dozen areas like this. This was probably the most extreme, but I had a lot of these areas where we would get just these continual concerns about, and we would show up and it would be a rather minor thing most of the time. And so again, this seems really obvious. I had a Mayo Clinic sign shop. I partnered with them and we had some signs made up, and it was just a basic warning sign. And this plays into the psychology kind of our customers. Is the photo on the left looks like it's in a forgotten staircase that we don't maintain, that we don't care about, and we're not really aware of. The photo on the right, I mean, it's a different time of year, and I didn't stage this picture to make it look nice and neatly shoveled like it is and things, but it showed our customers we're aware of this, we're concerned, and we'll take care of it. It also gave them a warning that, okay, take a good look at these stairs. There's a good chance these things could be slippery. Use caution when you go up and down these stairs. And I replicated this, again, through at least a half dozen other sites at Mayo Clinic. This took care of, I had the data at one time. I don't have that right now, but it was, like 60% of our corrective maintenance work orders that we would get on these areas stating that they were slippery. You'll see if you look close, if you got a big monitor, you can see there's a little residual salt on this step pad here. And so we didn't stop salting these stairs. And it really at no time did we stop salting at Mayo Clinic. We just reduced the amount of salt we used, and we put the salt where it was needed. And that was it. We didn't waste salt. We didn't salt this entire staircase. If only this pad needed it, we would salt the pad. We weren't responding to slippery requests and just throwing it down. There was some times where it might have been a little snow on it, like this, and employees would be cautious. They'd take it easy. And my crews would get there and take care of it. And they would get there without a corrective maintenance work order. They wouldn't feel that pressure to do something. That was one thing my crews felt, is if they got a corrective maintenance work order, they felt the pressure. If it said slippery, they felt pressured to salt. So if I could reduce those corrective maintenance work orders and we respond to these on our scheduled time, that reduced the amount of salt we use. So there's a lot of kind of mental and psychology. That side of it is also kind of a vital factor in this, not only with our customers, but with our crew members as well. And then salt brine. So this was another thing, and don't laugh at this picture. Let me get to it and explain. So this was another thing that we took away from our smart salt training, was in order to reduce the amount of salt you're putting on your parking lots and your roadways and things, salt brine is a necessary component to do that. At Mayo Clinic, we'd experimented with salt brine at least 2 different times during my tenure as a crew member, and both attempts were unsuccessful. We tried it and it didn't work. Well, we tried it without any guidance. We mixed salt with water and we put it in a tank and we sprayed it down, and it didn't work. And we tried it a couple times and we said it didn't work, and we just moved away from it. It's a lot more scientific than that, and it's a lot more precise than that. And we didn't have any guidance on it. We saw the city spraying it down, we saw the state spraying it down, and we just thought there really wasn't much to it. Just, and then more salt, the better, the higher salt concentration. We were lost when we were trying it. So we took the guidance of the recommendations from the smart salt class, and there was a healthy dose of skepticism when it came to salt brine. I didn't have it in my budget that first year to purchase a salt brine maker. And we just decided because of that skepticism, I didn't want to spend some of Mayo Clinic's money and have it not work, and then have this piece of equipment we didn't want or need any longer. So as you can see, I've got some talented crew members, and they made a salt brine maker out of equipment we had in our shop. And we did this on rain days. So we built this in the fall on rain days and things. And I had like 4 crew members. 2 of them were actively involved, and I had 2 others that would assist and give ideas and things. And they put this together. And I mean, if anybody laughed when they saw this, I know I definitely did the first time. Kind of a respectful chuckle, when I saw it. It looks like something somebody built in their garage, and that's exactly what it is. But I tell you, after some experiment and some time, this worked. This made salt brine, and it made correct salt brine. My crew did everything from watching YouTube videos. They consulted with some folks who had done this successfully. Used a lot of different resources and some experiments, and had some fails and some starts and stops, but it didn't take them that long. And I think I ended up with $600 in this system, and that included the new pump and motor. I bought a cheap one, but I bought a new pump and motor, and there were some fittings and things that I needed to buy, but everything else was free. And this was our first salt brine spreader that we had at Mayo Clinic. So I'm sure when everybody thinks of Mayo Clinic, you don't think of this, and I hope you don't. We're definitely a state-of-the-art medical institution, and I will promise you the tools that we're using on our patients are not homemade in a garage. But as facilities and grounds maintenance, sometimes we do what's needed to be done to get the job done. So here's our first successful test. I mean, this was that big of a deal. I was standing up on top of one of our parking ramps, watching our one of the techs put down salt brine. And I failed to mention too, we did have a salt brine sprayer that we had in storage from our previous salt brine attempts. We purchased one in about 2012, 2013. Tried it a couple times, put it in storage. It just sat there. We pulled it out. My crew renovated that, and then we started reusing this. So this was a perfect example for salt brine. I said before, we had contractors doing the salting and plowing on almost all our parking lots, loading docks, those big areas. This we did in-house with our Mayo spray truck. We got about a ½ inch of snow. It ended about 3:30 in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right at afternoon commute time. 4 to 6 is our busy time in Rochester. Really difficult snow to deal with. You see the bus here ready to pick people up. So we have crews on the sidewalk. We're trying to get the parking lot safe to get people out. But it wasn't enough to really have to do everything. It wasn't like a slick snow. It was really powdery and dry. We took the salt brine out. We went to work. We pre-treated some and we post-treated some, and we did the whole campus. We got everybody out of there. Got not a complaint, not an issue. By morning, the snow that was in the parking spaces we didn't spray had all just shriveled away and was gone. And so this one time, we saved 10 ton of salt by doing this one time, using salt brine rather than if we would have used rock salt on this, based on those records that I'd kept in prior winters. So one event, we saved 10 ton of salt. It went a ways. I mean, that paid for our garage built salt brine sprayer right there, one time. And so that worked really well. We proved that salt brine was a component, and then I was prepared to purchase a salt brine maker. I said, we can do this. I can go to leadership. I can get funding for this. Let's do it. My crew said, why spend? Again, they're good stewards of Mayo Clinic's finances. They said, why build it? Or why buy one when we can build one? They'd been sketching this up ever since they built the first one. They'd been kind of sketching up this second one. So again, this was in the wintertime between snows. They built this, and tell you, it works as good as any of them. It doesn't have an automatic sensor, an automatic dump. It has to be monitored. That's the main difference. And I did switch this. We went from the following winter, I went from a gas motor and pump to electric, just to reduce the fumes and the noise, because we had to run it with the door open this way, so we could run it in with the doors closed, and it was a little more comfortable for everybody in the building. So and I just share this again because salt brine doesn't have to be a gigantic financial outlay. If you want to buy a salt brine maker from one of the manufacturers, they're great. I've heard a lot of good things about them, and I don't want to talk negatively about those, but I'd like to show this. You don't have to. And we've been using this salt brine maker now for, I think that was this past winter was the third winter we've used this. And there was a big construction project in this area. It just got moved to a new location. They moved the whole thing over, and it keeps going. Very little maintenance, very little anything to it. So I can't say enough again about salt brine's role in our salt reduction. It's been a tremendous tool. And again, I can thank Smart Salt Training for leading us down that road. So what's responsible for the largest actual physical reduction in salt use at Mayo Clinic is the partnership that we had with our contractors. Contractors did those they spread salt on most of those 125 acres of hard surface. That was a lot of salt every year. I have all the numbers. Mayo Clinic doesn't like me to share really specific numbers. In public, it was a lot of salt being put down. So it was a discussion, and it was a lot of talk through this about liability, about changing things. There was a lot of these discussions. So the number one thing, if you've ever been to one of my salt presentations in the past, I always bring this term up because this seems to be kind of a snow industry term, plowing salt. And I just noticed that every time I would ask a contractor, hey, can you go plow this? Can you go, it's snowy here. Can you go take care of it? And everybody always said, I'll go plow and salt it. Yep, we'll go plow and salt. I said it at one time, my crew said it, my contractor said it. It was just kind of this thing. And I started saying, wow, that's part of the problem, is this plow and salt mentality. It's two acts. It really is. I had to get everybody's mindset to plow, and then if it's needed, salt if it's needed, but don't just plow and blindly salt. Really, we're unlocking the brain and the experience in that plow drive, in all our snow removal personnel, particularly the snowplow drivers who are running those salters. Plow it, come back around. Does it need salting now? Could it need salting later? Should I come back? And if it does need salting, how much do I put down? Just no more blind plow and salt and drive away. There's more to snow removal than that. And that kind of, and that was the perceived easy button, but it necessarily wasn't. Oversalting causes issues. Just blindly salting, sometimes you're not putting on enough. It caused all kinds of other issues. So we really worked through this. That term isn't used around Mayo Clinic anymore by anybody. It took a few years to get that out. Now it's kind of a joke. If I hear it, there's usually a smirk on somebody's face as they're saying it. But that was kind of a big transition. And again, when I'm reading this and I'm reviewing it, I'm like, wow, this seems like it's really basic stuff. But it was amazing how difficult it was to change that plow and salt culture. Spot salting was another thing. Contractors coming onto our properties, if they would get called or they would notice a slippery spot or something, normally they would salt the whole property, the whole lot, the whole property, rather than trying to spot salt the issue. Spot salting got brought about at the same time as this transition, and it became a lot of those questions. Why did you salt that whole parking lot? Well, there was a couple slippery spots. Why didn't you just salt the couple slippery spots? Why are we salting all these dry areas on the lot? Because there we go with our white lots again. If you don't spot salt, then you end up with your white parking lots. And again, there was no heated discussions. There was discussions though, and monitoring. I went around and at first I went around and drove around every property every time, and then I eventually got smart and got access to Mayo Clinic's camera system that I could do it from my desk. On a lot of areas I could monitor and talk and things, but it was just a lot of visits and a lot of discussions with the contractors, and they wanted to do the right thing. I've got great contractors, and I definitely don't want to minimize them on this presentation at all. Everybody was trying to do the right thing, and just to get on that exact same page of what we felt that right thing is took us a little bit of adjustment time. And a big thing, big thing, and this is another thing that I can't believe we had never done before, is to calibrate the salt spreaders. Um, those of us that do fertilizer application, that do herbicide, pesticide spraying, we calibrate those sprayers and fertilizer spreaders. Those are calibrated. We know what we're putting down. There's a rate recommended on everything. Salt spreader, I had never calibrated a salt spreader ever, and my contractors hadn't either. So this was something that was brought up in smart salt training, and smart salt training also recommended some rates. Here's some possible rates based on temperature, based on things, and these are guidelines as far as rates go. So we had a guideline already. We just had to implement it. So we first started with our Mayo Clinic equipment, and we calibrated that, and we figured out a method on how to calibrate it. And it went great. We were putting on about 5 times the amount of salt that was recommended coming out of our Mayo Clinic, between 3 and 6 or 3 and 7. It varied. Even though it was the exact same equipment, it varied quite a bit on how much was coming out. So we got everything adjusted. We got everything calibrated. We came up with 3 rates. And then I asked our contractors to come and calibrate their equipment too. This was voluntary. They were under a current contract, and I couldn't dictate a lot unless I wanted to change the contract, and I didn't want to do that. But again, we had a great relationship with our contractors. They were willing to come and calibrate. They were also curious. And we made this into it was a fun event. We had donuts, we had coffee, we had it in our warm shop. We were ready for them when they came. We were ready. I had crew members ready with scales and catch pans, and we were ready to go. And we had fun. We talked to them and we discussed ideas and things. And when they left, they had a calibration card in the cab of their truck, a low rate, a medium rate, and a high rate for that spreader. Most of those spreaders too, we had some that were 10 or 15 times higher than what they should have been. None of them were even close. I think 4 to 6 times the rate was the general, was kind of the general range. But some of the older gas powered ones were 10 or more times the rate. But we were able to, it didn't take that long. We were able to get everything calibrated, adjusted, have that discussion, and and we had everybody ready to spread salt when needed. So we'd worked through a lot of the when do I spread salt, kind of how do I do it, when do I do it, and now this was the how much is what we got to. And we really left this up to the contractor, but I had a lot of discussions about why did you decide on this rate, why did you decide on that, and just in case we had to make some adjustments, because these were just guidelines. And so, and it went really well, and it was actually a really good process to go through. So now, talk through all this, and now we'll get to some results. Salt savings. So I put this talk together. This was after winter 2018, 2019 in Rochester. Rochester, winter 2018, 2019, we got 93 inches of snow, and we got a normal amount of ice. 93 inches of snow is about double our normal average snowfall. I usually shot for around 50 inches. 45 to 50 inches is what our normal snowfall, plowable snowfall was. This was 93 inches this winter. So I was a little nervous about these results based on that amount of snow and the amount of snow events we had. But I was very pleasantly surprised. In one winter, we reduced the amount of salt applied to our Rochester campus by 60%. That was compared to the previous winter when we did have a more normal snowfall. And when I compare winter 2018, 2019 to winter 16, 17, it was a 72% reduction in salt that we applied to our campus. So tremendous amount of reduction in salt. It was absolutely incredible. So if I was sitting there listening to me talk, what would have come up with safety? Well, did you have people slipping and falling all over the place? Did you have car accidents? Did you have people getting stuck on ice trying to go up an incline? And no, the answer to that is no, we didn't. So being Mayo Clinic and being a big organization, we have a dedicated safety department, and that safety department monitors slip and falls, as well as I have my work order system, facilities work order system, where people could contact me with similar issues. Through this whole process, I worked closely with my safety department on this to alert me of any issues. An increase in slip and falls at any one of these sites as we're reducing salt. Believe me, safety was as skeptical about this as anybody was. They said salt as much as you possibly can, and that was their guidance. And I said, well, I think we can meet your safety needs as well as our environmental needs and our budgetary needs. I think we can, match everything up. And fortunately, I was able to hit that. We compared slip and fall data for, so this was in, again, after winter 2019. So I had four winters of slip and fall data. So prior to any salt reduction efforts, first year, second year, and then third year where we had the large reduction. No change in slip and fall data. Again, with this many buildings, this many sites, this much square footage, and being a medical institution, unfortunately, some slip and falls are going to happen, and I'm never going to accept that, but it's inevitable that it's going to happen. Essentially the same number. It varied a little bit winter to winter, but there was no spike. There was no increase. It went up one winter, went down a little bit, and within a few. So it wasn't significant. I also compared our winter months slip and falls with our summertime outdoor slip and falls, and they were essentially the same. Year to year, almost always within a few of each other. So really reducing salt didn't create slipperier conditions. That's what that data showed me. And I have the data. I had the data over 4 years. That's not a decade or 2 decades worth of data, but it was enough to tell me that we could safely continue our salt reduction efforts without putting our patients, our employees, our visitors, or any of our staff at risk. Due to this, it was really, we're still salting, but we're putting the salt down where it's needed, when it's needed, and only that. And then, I touched a little bit at the beginning on landscape. The impact to our landscape, the reduction of snow removal activity impact to our landscape was tremendous. In my 19 years at Mayo Clinic, I had never seen such low impact to the landscape as I'd seen. By middle of April, our campus had greened up. We didn't have all the dead edges. We used to have a foot of almost every sidewalk was dead salt kill. The entrance and the exit to every parking lot, every property was killed with overspread salt. Most of the curb edges were killed with overspread salts. We'd have hundreds of plants every year that were killed by salt. We'd have a dozen trees that were killed by salt, directly from salt, not plowing activities. This is just, they're salted out. And then my crews, and I was a member of that crew for a lot of years, it was pallets of grass seed, and it was thousands of tons of compost we would put down to try to get this grass to grow back. And you'd work for weeks and weeks nonstop, almost the whole crew doing this. And then the grass that didn't come back real good, then it was thin, and then we'd get crabgrass. So we're fighting crabgrass and knotweed and weeds in this. Without all the salt, we didn't have the damage. The grass came back, saved, it was thousands of dollars in seeding efforts and hundreds of labor hours. And then you extrapolate that into the less pesticides we're using to keep the weeds out of the turf. And it was incredible, that lasting impact that reducing salt had on our campus. It paid dividends every day, all year round. And so I didn't talk specifically about budgets. I can't share financial information. Again, that's not allowed. But I can say it was significant. The financial savings followed right along with our percentage savings. The amount of salt, the budgetary numbers were very close to that same percentage. I can say, I can give you a little hint. So after this winter 17-18, went to leadership with the amount of dollars I saved on salt. My crew saved on salt, and some equipment that could, contribute to this in the future. So I was able, out of this savings, a portion of the savings, I bought a new 1-ton truck for our salt brine sprayer, bought 2 new blades for our bobcats that would scrape better. I bought a new sidewalk machine with cab, snow blower, snow brush, blade, kind of a decked out snow removal machine for the crew. And a lot of this was a thank you for their efforts too. That I really appreciated their efforts. This is more comfortable. This is better equipment for them to use. So the crew benefited from this on that side. Is boy, they got some really nice new equipment out of these savings. Mayo Clinic benefited in many different ways on this salt reduction. So that wraps up my talk. I don't know how long I've been talking here, but I'm sure we're all ready to have me done talking, and I'm looking forward to some questions and comments from all of you on this. So this was just a real quick overview of Mayo Clinic's efforts down the salt reduction path, and from my lens. Again, kind of the three main components leading up to this. The smart salt training was very important to my efforts. My crew buying in, and kind of that continual effort to lead them down that path and help them understand that why the buying in is important. And that communication, that change, it was really just a big change effort. And with our contractors, with my staff, with my leadership, I mentioned our safety department, just all the players involved in this, just a great level of open, very respectful communication back and forth. That was very important to these efforts. And it was a great experience. It was a lot of work, but just, it was such a great experience. And, just as, even after I've left the role, it continues on, and it doesn't need any one person or anything to be constantly maintaining this. It's part of the culture at Mayo Clinic now to do snow removal. And then lastly, we did enter into a new contract my last year as the supervisor, and that contract was written with salt conservation kind of as a priority in it. So there was some very specific language in the contract that called for, I want all my contractors that spread salt on Mayo Clinic property will be Smart Salt Level 1 certified. That's in my contract. All the salt spreaders that spread salt on Mayo Clinic property must be calibrated, and a calibration sheet in the cab. Again, it's things that we learned that are vital to financial savings, environmental savings, salt savings, all the way across. There was language like that in there that just directed it, and that helps. It's not necessarily so much of a voluntary effort anymore. It still is, but there is some actual contractual language that helps support that. So, well, thank you all. Appreciate you spending your lunch hour with me today, and that's all I have for us today.
Wow, Nick, those savings are really incredible. And I am sure pretty inspiring to folks on the call. And as I think we will see, but people will also be sharing this story out. We are experiencing about like a 5 to 6 minute delay between our conversation and what's being shared on YouTube. So okay. I'm hoping that we'll get some folks to ask some questions in here in the chat soon, but so far it's been pretty quiet. But I wanted to ask you about, you just mentioned contracts. So a lot of your work, it's done by contractors. You were trying to encourage them, but then you said now you have some language. I don't know, would it be possible, and maybe you'd have to go up the chain to get some approval to see if we could, like if you could share those contracts out, because I do know that other folks that are interested, it's like getting those contracts written can be a barrier.
Definitely. So I'm unable to share my Mayo Clinic contract, but there is a sample contract available out there. I know, yeah, Brooker, okay. Yes, and I use a lot of that language as the model for mine.
Is the model for yours? Okay.
Yep. That's a wonderfully worded. That's a tremendous contract there to serve as a guideline.
Okay, thank you. It does look like we do have a question that came in on the chat here. So I'm going to read this from Dan. He said, Nick, would you have a winter severity index or a number of winter events that would correlate with the 2 winters that you had salt savings examples for? Thanks, Dan. So I think just trying to make sure we can show that your savings weren't just due to it being a lighter winter with few storms.
Yeah, definitely. I've got data on every snow event that we got for all 3 of those winters, the amount of snow we had, the temperature it was, and all that data. I had a full spreadsheet for all 3 winters. And I think that was one of the most telling things, was that the winter where I showed the greatest salt savings was really the winter we had double the snow and the snow events, it wasn't quite double the snow events because we did have one big, like 16 or 20 inch. That was that year we got that huge 20-inch snow that almost shut Rochester down for 3 days. But it was a large winter, and still we saved the snow. And so, yeah, Matt Donovan, I don't have that anymore. I left that all with Matt. He does have that information though. So
okay, that's great.
it's a great question though. Yep.
Yeah, and thanks, Nick. And maybe what I'll do is follow up with Matt and see if he could share that. Then we could kind of clean it up in a way that we could put maybe on, like, link it even to our YouTube, and so people could go on and see that.
And I will share that Matt it was his first winter last winter in charge, and he was a little frustrated because the number of inches of snow were rather low last winter in Rochester. I think we barely hit 30 inches, but his salt was almost what it was the winter before. And it just, I mean, Dan, you bring up a great point with that, with, the number of events do play a factor into that. It's sometimes it can hide, the total snow amount can hide in there. If you get a 12-inch snow and you only salt afterwards or something, well, that's a lot less salt than getting 12 1-inch snows. So,
yeah, definitely a lot of variability and hard to compare apples to apples when we're talking about, winter season.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, Dan did appreciate your answer. He said, thanks, Nick, in the chat. So I'm hoping here that we can maybe hear from a few more folks with their questions. But while I wait for that, I'm going to just tell everyone thanks again for joining today. And just a reminder that next month, our webinar is going to be with Matt Whittam from the town of Lynn. And so he's going to be presenting all about brine. Nick you did an amazing job today. I loved your kind of backyard engineering, those brine makers. And it was such a great story that your staff was like, why go buy something? We can make this. And we're excited to make, version 2.0. So that was a great story, some great pictures. So again, if anyone has questions, you can put those in the chat. Nick has shared his email, and I'm also happy if you want to reach out to Saltwise if there would be resources that you would like to see to help people in your community make similar reductions. So with that, I think, Nick, we can try to see if I had any other questions for you while we kind of buy a little time. I apologize about the delay here. I think I was working through the audio. I think I clicked the live stream a little too soon, so people had a little bit of dead time at the beginning.
Okay.
And we're a little bit of a delay now, but I'm not seeing anything. So I think that I'm trying to decide if we should call it and then have people just follow up with us potentially with any further questions.
Yeah, and we're always happy if people have questions or comments or anything. We've been involved with dozens of people and organizations and stuff over the years as we've talked to groups and things like that. And, we're always happy to collaborate on this and share some of our experience and continue to learn. I think every time we have these conversations with others that are in this industry, we take away as much as we provide every time. So we're always happy to do that.
Well, thank you, Nick. You really did an excellent job. And I know we all missed Matt today, but that means, he's ready and raring to go to speak next time. So
yeah, he'd love to.
Cool. All right. So with that, I think I'm going to sign us off and say thanks again, Nick. And we really appreciate everybody who made it today. And we will have this archived, for the future. So feel free to share this link with others and continue to spread the word. We do have, a message from Fred that came in now. So Fred, yes, I'm getting your message now. It says it was sent at 12:58. So I'm just going to message real back real quick to Fred. People are going to be like, what's going on when they get to this point? Hey, Fred. Okay. We did have a message here from the Conservation Foundation, and they said, thank you, Nick.
Oh, yeah, you're very welcome. No, its efforts are rewarding in so many ways. And I know for my team that the environmental aspect of this was the biggest driver in doing this.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna wait then maybe just one more moment here. Again, if people want to thank Nick, you can do that in the chat. And then Nick, I will send you, once I clean the video up here, remove our beginning and ending, I can kind of cut that down and send that to you as well. And again, we just really appreciate you jumping in and sharing with folks. So.
Oh, you're very welcome. I really appreciate you asking us to share our experiences. So it was fun.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay. Thank you. You too.